Hi everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel Karoline's Knits. As you can tell, I'm joined by the first little creature wanting to be part of today's episode. Are you neglected, Fela? Is that the problem? My name is Karoline and I live in Scotland with my partner Ben, and I guess you can no longer really call her puppy, and my dog Fela. So this is Fela who's come to say hi. I am originally Danish, but as I said, I've lived in Scotland for almost 8 years now. There's definitely construction work, and so there might be background noises of construction. That is just the life of a new build. So I'm just gonna live with it, because today really fits filming wise, and as I'm sure other podcasters will know, you always have to strike a balance between having enough to show that it makes sense to film, but not having so much to show that it's like hard to fit it all in. Fela, could you move over here, please? We have just she always she can sleep all day until I start talking, and then it's like she's immediately like, Mum, you're talking, why is it not to me? Can something happen, please? So we've just been training some chicks. We've played Find It with her ball. She's had a nice chew. I've done lots of things to hopefully just calm her down a little bit. It's a typical grey day here in Scotland, but that makes for very good filming weather. So I thought, you know what, I feel well rested, I feel chatty, there's the perfect amount of stuff to show, so I'm just gonna get on with it today. So I've also kept my joggers on, gotta be comfy for the podcast. So let's get started. It's been a wee while because, to be honest, what I'm wearing has been taking up all my knitting time. I am currently wearing my sweater, my finished sweater number 20, that I have been test knitting for the lovely Louise from My Favourite Things Knitwear. I started this, essentially the deadline was 4 weeks after received pattern, so I had to knit quite monogamously on this. Yes, I had to knit pretty monogamously on this to finish it to the deadline, but actually once I kind of got in the groove, it was a lot quicker than I expected it to be. To hit gauge, I sized down half a needle size, so I knit this on 5mm needles with 4mm needles used for the ribbing. I knit it in 1 strand of Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino in the colour Nordic Beach, and 1 strand of Knitting for Olive's Soft Silk Mohair in the colour Putty, I think. Both of those were kindly gifted, and it's my first time. I've knitted in Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Merino many a times and really like it, but it's the first time for me knitting in Heavy Merino, and I really like it too. I love this colour. I think it's a neutral, but with having blonde hair, I always think it's the nicest if anything neutral on me has a slightly cooler tone, because it then doesn't clash with my hair. It kind of lets that be sort of the warm golden tone. As I said, I knit it on 5mm needles in 4 weeks, so clearly it's doable. It's a much easier knit than it looks, and that's because first of all, the pattern has really good diagrams, and personally, or charts, they're not called diagrams in English, that's in Danish. The pattern has really nice charts, and I just find that the easiest to knit from, because you can just tick off a row as you go. You don't have to think about numbers, there's no counting, you just have to knit each row as you go. And it's knit back piece first, the top of the back, then you knit one side of the front piece, the other side, join and knit a little bit on the front, join all of it, finish the body, pick up for neckline and pick up for sleeves. And the picking up of stitches is probably the hardest part, but to be honest, it wasn't as hard as I kind of expected. And I actually think for once I'm quite happy with my pickup. The pattern has 2 different kinds of V-necks, and most of the testers and Louise's own sample has like a really thick collar, so it's like double the length of mine, but I just thought this is obviously quite an oversized. I knit the biggest size, and you can tell that on me right, that's where I end. It's like basically almost like it feels like the positive ease in this is huge, right? And that's kind of the fit of it, with the sort of dropped shoulder as well. But yes, I knew I wanted a bit of skin showing, because somehow I think it's slightly more flattering. I'm not going to say slimming because that's a fat phobic word to use and not really what I mean, but I do think it's much more flattering to then have a bit of skin on show. And yeah, I really like it. What has really surprised me, and well, not surprised, because I deliberately picked a neutral colour, because I know that for just throwing on at home kind of knits, which is what I use the most, I know that neutral colours are often just easier for me to wear. So I wanted this to be neutral. Yes, you can lie down now. So I wanted this to be neutral, and I definitely think I got that with this colour, but what I hadn't really accounted for was that the v-neck is perfect. Obviously we're currently in April, and Scotland can be anything from like warm enough to wear a t-shirt, and this is not a big extreme. Oh, do I deserve kisses as well? Fela, you're not a parrot. You're not a parrot. Could you move over here, please? But yeah, I hadn't. So obviously, it can go from being quite warm to being quite cold, and it's a bit hard to adjust like your temperature in some way. So like it might be cold enough for a big knit, but having it high up in the neck, you kind of don't get enough ventilation, if that makes sense. And actually, I think the v-neck really serves that purpose, that it does just get a bit of air coming through, if that makes sense. And so it's actually been considerably more useful and wearable knit than I expected already. I have worn it out on dog walks, and it's very good for that. I definitely think that for me, this style is like throw on with a pair of jeans and sneakers kind of knit. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's also good to have those kind of basic knits, because it's definitely a bit different than what I'd usually knit. I thoroughly enjoyed testing for Louise, and I hope that I will get to do it again, and hopefully soon. I know we're going into summer, and I'm really excited by some of her summer patterns, so I hope I'll get to do it again. But yes, I would thoroughly recommend it. Again, really not as hard as it looks. Cables are much easier to knit than you'd think, and so I actually think it's for like an advanced beginner or even intermediate, that it's like the perfect kind of knit for that. I don't know if we just ignore the neighbourhood watchdog, who actually with Knit Group the other day, I was speaking about how in these videos I always find it a hard balance of how much I include Fela and how much I don't, because as you can tell, she can be a bit hard to ignore sometimes, and I feel like today is just going to be one of those days. There's going to be a lot of Fela, right? Fela, like there's nothing that's gonna make her not be a menace today, I think. She had a cough last week, and so she's not been out for the magical word I'm not going to say, but she will be listening out for. And so we've slowly picked it up again, and she's just so excited to be back out. We've just been really unlucky that essentially she finished her first season, and then she got the cough, so she really hasn't been out much for the past many weeks. And I don't think she particularly agrees with that, do you? You don't like being an inside dog, though? You like being outside in the garden all day? You do? Right. Enough Fela chat. So what else have I finished? I'm just quickly going to show you these. It is technically a sock saga segment, but I finally finished. I knitted one of these socks. Good girl. I knitted one of these socks as my first socks, and they didn't have a partner, so I have finally taken the time to finish the second sock. These have no recipient, and well, they did have one, but that recipient is now way too big for these. So they've kind of just been lying in my drawer. For some reason, it also seems that my counting was a little bit off, so they're not completely identical. But essentially, these are the Sunday Socks Junior, patterned by Petite Knit, knitted in Peruvian Highland wool, which is one of the recommended yarns. I think I used, without ends, I used about 42 grams. So less than 1 ball, so I think with all the ends in it, it would be less. The dog is very interested in these socks, aren't you? So yeah, I'm basically going to put these away as a potential present. I think they're the cutest when you like do a little fold down edge. I think the problem was that I tried to, I don't know if you've seen the lovely Knit with Nimbus, but she has this beautiful service dog. Well, Nimbus is a poodle, and she makes Nimbus hold all of these things, and just Nimbus is just amazing. And I was like, we've been practicing holding it, and I made Fela do that, and now I think she's like, is that what you're gonna ask me to do, Mum? Yes, that's what you were hoping for, weren't it? Because there's usually treats for that, but it's not. So anyway, I finished these. They're very cute. I will say, if you are looking for like your first sock pattern or like a quick thing to knit, socks like this are perfect. As it is such a tiny size, it's obviously before children start walking, you know, it's like a newborn baby size, and so it should be the kind of knit that it doesn't really matter, it's not sock yarn. So these are all done, and I have actually bought some, I have some kind of nice brown tags, and I bought like, you know, like the light bulb stitch markers in gold, and I'm gonna basically attach a tag to them and put them aside. Did you see that? Are you thinking you're gonna hold them for me? But I have no treats, Fela. I have no treats for you. And yeah, put them aside for when we next have children. And this is quite a neutral colour, isn't it? Oh, you can also see there's little ends. So that's one of them. And as part of this, the past few weeks, I've really been thinking about my stash. Obviously, as many people, I went into the year being like, I'm done like buying so much yarn all the time. I am just not knitting through my stash at a speed where I feel like I'm realistically going to knit through my full stash this year. And for me, that was kind of a sobering thought in some way, because I love my stash. I've been now speaking to my knitting friends, they're like, there's no harm in selling yarn that you don't think you use, or yarn that you're no longer like interested in. And the thing is, there's no yarn in my stash that I don't want to work with, really, besides some mohair. That might be one thing, but no doubt I can find a use for it. So I just think essentially that I have all of this yarn, I have no plans to, like, I have no opportunity to knit it all up. But what ends up happening is that over time you build a lot of like odd balls, right? You just have like that you know, that one ball or two left over from a project, or yeah, you know, those are like, you want to try a new yarn quality, so you buy enough to like knit a hat or a pair of socks, and then you don't knit it up. Or maybe you have a special skein that you've not been wanting to use because it has a special meaning, or it was like, it's just your favorite color and you want it to have like a worthy project. I'm really bad for that, buying yarn and thinking this needs to be a perfect knit, and then not knowing what that perfect knit is. And so in all of this, I've really been, I think, as I did this test knit, and as I've been doing other things, I've really been thinking about those parts of my stash, because one thing is having lots of sweater quantities, but again, what about all those oddballs that you just kind of keep around? And actually the title for that, I'm gonna credit to my knitting friend Summer Knits, who came up with Oddball, because I'm keen to start some kind of knit along. Now, I don't think I'm ever going to be the type of person to host massive giveaways or host really complex knit alongs, because I just don't have the time to keep up with it. And I just know it's going to be one of those things that I would start with good intentions and not follow through with. So when I say a knit along, it's more like an inspiration along. And that's why I kind of like the Oddball along, because it's quite a casual name, isn't it? And it just describes a very specific type of knitting. Because what I struggle with is that in Danish, there's and Norwegian, etc., there's a good term for, like, you know, those extra balls you have after project that you make something with. And some people might call that scrap knitting, but what scrap knitting I think has been turned into is very much Bagger style knitting, which is, you know, knitting with like teeny tiny scraps and like quite colourful and like that beautifully creative, like no limits kind of knitting that she does. But it's not really what I am necessarily always thinking of. Like for me,
that would
feel like that was actually not very nice. At least it wasn't scolding. Right. Now it just kind of looks like I've peed myself or something. Like my whole leg is just covered in chai tea. So where did I come from? Anyway, I think I was saying that something like the Sunday socks for me are an example of a project like that, because it's kind of like, because it still feels like a complete project, if that makes sense. It's not just purely scraps. It's like saying, right, I have 1 or 2 balls, what's a nice like hat pattern or mittens or a scarf or a collarwork jumper, all of these things that you can make out of those balls. And I'm really keen that the odd ball along becomes a hashtag where you just find inspiration and exact amounts of what you've done. So for things like the Sunday socks, knowing that you only need 42 grams of, you know, a Peruvian Highland wool from Filcolana weight yarn, might mean you think, well, I did break into that second, you know, that final ball for this sweater, but I do have that much left. I could knit something and sort of stash it away. And a lot of these leftover knits, there's only so many mittens, hats and gloves, etc. that that one person can use. So I also plan on stashing some of it away, and it could become Christmas presents. When I spoke to my knitting group, I think they were at first like, oh, it's maybe not the right time of year, but at least in my opinion, if you're wanting to give hand knitted things away for Christmas, it's a great time to start thinking about just doing a project here and there, because you could actually end up with quite a lot of knitted things. And I don't necessarily think for a lot of things like this that you need recipients, because they can just go to anyone. So anyway, all of this to say that I am planning to make more of a dedicated video where I talk through some of my plans. Now I'm trying to decide what the actual format should be. If it should be like I show each and every single kind of yarn and the project for it, if I just talk in general terms, etc. I know Naomi from Naomi Joy Knits, she's keen to join in as well. And I need to follow up with her, because I feel like we're both constantly like, let's get this going, and then it doesn't really get going. But Naomi is absolutely brilliant, so I'll make sure to link her down below and you can check out her podcast. But I think she was keen to do maybe a bit more like Ravelry style, which I don't plan on doing, so maybe she'll pick up some of that. She might be wanting to do a few more giveaways. The main thing that I think I will do is that I will ask knitting friends if they will give discounts for some of their like suitable patterns. So I've already asked Laura from Penrose Knits if, for example, she would be willing to give a small discount code on the school run series that you've seen me knit a few times, because again, it's perfect for lots of different kinds of yarns. It has lots of different sizes, which is always good, that you have anything from baby to adult kind of thing. So that's kind of my casual plans, and I'd love to hear what you think. I don't have a set ending to it. My plan is just that it runs probably about to the end of year, and then I'll see where we're at the end of the day. A hashtag doesn't really close, does it? It's still a place that things can keep collating. And personally, one of the things I love the most about Instagram is actually hashtags used right. So sorry, Fila. So for things like you know, if you're looking up a sweater pattern, it's lovely to see what other colours people have knit it in, the fit of it, etc. So in all of this, I've actually been incredibly inspired to sort of knit through my stash. I also recently watched my friend Lissy's podcast where she was talking through her stash, and also my friend Sophie also recently did one talking through her stash. And as Lissy said, it's almost like falling in love with your stash all over. You know, once you kind of start thinking about what things can become, it's quite exciting. And that's certainly why I have found that those yarns that I have been close to just giving away, because I didn't think I was ever going to knit it up, and it was just kind of stuck in my stash And all of a sudden, when I started thinking about what it could become, I actually got quite excited about knitting it up and making something with it. So one project that I have finished that I count as like you know, using up scraps. Again, these are unblocked because I literally cast them off yesterday. Are these. These are the penny gloves from Knit. So the penny gloves are probably a simpler pattern as it comes. I'm just going to put it out there. I know lots of people have just made knits inspired by the penny gloves, but I quite like having a real pattern. So I have bought the pattern. These are the actual penny gloves and not just me trying to make up a pattern. But essentially they're just very basic mittens with no ribbing. So after washing, I reckon they will like roll a little bit more. But yeah, I finished these, and the reason I got so excited by these is that at the moment we're kind of in like the final preparation phase for the wedding, and that means I am up 3 times a week. I cannot believe it. I never thought this was going to happen. 3 times a week at 5:30 in the morning to go to the gym. And for some reason in the mornings my hands are always freezing when I drive in the car, so I tend to have like my car on like 23 degrees full like blast with like, you know, the like heaters going on my hands to keep them nice and warm. As much as I love my car, and I really do, I used to drive a 2001 Clio, a Renault Clio that we bought at Facebook Marketplace. So when I got my current car, it felt like a real upgrade, but it does not have a heated steering wheel, so my hands do get a little bit cold. So I'm thinking that these will keep me warm on morning drives, and also often when I walked a little rascal that spilled tea all over me today, I often need my hands free for feeding treats. And I think these would be perfect for it. So I started out with these. These are knitted in one strand of Karoline Saga, which is it's a light fingering weight that runs 300 meters per 50 grams, and it's 100% lamb's wool, and it's lovely. It's like the type of yarn if you would like to think that you're knitting in rustic yarn without actually knitting in rustic yarn. Like, it's definitely woolly. I guess it's not rustic, it's just woolly, and that's why it's so lovely. Like, it's definitely like next to skin soft, but it's not super wash merino. I can't really describe it, but I really like it. This was many moons ago when I very first started speaking to Simona. She put a ball of this in an order I made because I'd asked what it felt like, because I'd never felt Saga before, and this ball has now been in my stash since then, and we're probably talking like autumn 2020, and I just thought, well, could actually become something. And so in my stash I also had, this is in the colour light grey by the way, in my stash I also had some Karoline Telia in the colour Snow White that had left over from another project where I thought I wasn't going to have enough, so I ended up ordering more and then didn't run out. So I had like two and a half-ish balls left. Did you just try to eat that? And it's one of those that obviously white is such a classic colour, and I was definitely getting into like that idea, oh well, this could become something like really exciting, and you know, it's quite a lot of yarn, maybe I should keep hold of it. And then I just thought it's gonna make some really like delicious feeling like just squishy and nice and fussy gloves. So yeah, I decided to actually use the yarn, which is another thing of the oddball along, is that not constantly saving your yarn for better project, because I think often what happens to me that then I might be like, well, I should buy new yarn for this. So anyway, I've made these, and they were perfect, like telly and meeting knitting, and like one of those projects that I could see myself knitting many of because they're so easy to knit. So these are my penny gloves. I also pulled out at the same time, so I'm going to block those today. I also pulled out, I have, so in the pattern she does give one of the recommended yarns in the pattern, and that's actually how I thought of the penny gloves originally, and this was going to be my first sort of choice. She actually recommends Filcolana alva, which is an 100% alpaca yarn. I don't know technically what yarn they consider alva. If it's, I don't think it's fully lace, and I don't think it's like, I don't know how different it actually is thickness wise to Saga. Definitely thinner, so it's probably like in between lace and light fingering. But in the original pattern you hold these two double, and I wanted to knit up one pair of penny gloves to kind of see how much yarn it would actually use, and then I could knit these up. So these are probably as soon cast on, so I can get, literally this is all I have left of the alva, and I'd quite like to knit that up. I do have a lot more left of the marzipan colour, and by my calculation that should be enough to make like a pair of mittens maybe. So I might save that for like a really nice pair of mittens, because alva is such a lovely soft yarn. It's so soft. So that's what I've planned for that. So that's my finished object since last time, which, you know what, I am quite tough with, because I actually did not think this would even be done. So the fact that there's more is just a bonus. So what am I currently knitting on? So I currently have sort of one main whip. I still have, and it's just over there in hibernation. I have not worked on this since we last spoke. I just decided that maybe I wanted a small break from cables, and this is the Hvid cardigan from Aftenstrik. And one reason that I think this kind of went dormant was I think I need to decide if the fabric is too dense. Looking at it, it still has quite a lot of drapes. It also has the most obscene amount of dog hairs in it. Like my yarns, or my knits often have a little bit of fela in them, but like this is next level. It's like fully speckled with black dog hair, which is not particularly nice. But anyway, I think I need to decide if I think it might be too dense for the pattern. I'm still not sure. What do you think? Does it look too dense? Can fabric be like too dense? It does straight, right? Like if I hold it, and you can like fold it. So I feel like holding it again, it was less dense than I remembered. So yeah, I haven't touched that for a while. Might pick that up soon, because it's a bit more for thinking knit. The main whip that I have been working on around the penny gloves is this, which I have shown once because I cast on for the neck. Top tip, if you have to knit a roll neck, it's one of those whips you always have room for, because no one likes knitting 17 or 18 or whatever it was centimeters of 1x1 ribbing. So most of this has been knitted like you can see how long that is, doing meetings and knit nights and that type of thing, and so I didn't really notice that I had to knit a whole roll neck. But yes, this is the Karoline sweater by Knitting for Olive, and I'm currently working on the shoulder construction, which I hope you can see. So it essentially starts with a saddle shoulder, where you increase front and back, and now I am on the part here where you increase towards the sleeves. That's what the word I was looking for. And I am almost done with increasing for sleeves, and then you go on to some more increases for both front and back, and then I should be ready to split for sleeves. And this it's not, for some reason it hasn't been a particularly inspiring knit to me so far, but it's such a classic knit. I am using 2 strands that was inspired by a post made on Knitting Follows page like many moons ago. I bought this last spring, these yarns. So one is Filcolana Nina, which is 100% superwash merino wool. I bought this from Knit. It's in like the very dark grey colour. Do not remember what it's called. It will definitely be a melange shade because it has that kind of multi-tone to it. And I'm holding that with 1 strand of Cumulus by Fibre Spates, which is 74% baby cereal alpaca and 26 mulberry silk. Cumulus runs a little bit thicker than actual mohair. it's probably more, again, light fingering than like true lace weight, but it's fine. You can usually make it work. So yeah, I am knitting the biggest size. For some reason, this is one of Knitting for Olive's least size inclusive patterns, which is strange because most of them go up to like 5XL, I think. But this only goes up to 2. So maybe it's just because it's been a long time since they made it. I'm not sure. Which will give me a positive ease of around 10 to 15 centimeters, which is quite a lot. So I think basically I did it because I swatched for this many moons ago, was too lazy to swatch again, and just decided that if I knit the biggest size and I knit it on smaller needles, I should hit somewhere in the 2XL region, XL region. And what I might do is incorporate decreases along the waist, because what I'm starting to find for my body shape is that I am more of a UK 18 around my top half, and that often for things to like fit well literally around like where the circular yoke would be, I often have to be a size 18, also across my chest. But then as we go to like my waist and belly and hips, I'm actually much more for a true size 16. And so what ends up happening is that if the fit is right up here, it can be quite oversized further down. So I feel like if I just incorporate some decreases in the waist and I don't increase back out for ribbing, because often what I find happens is that it's especially around the bottom ribbing part that it just doesn't cinch in enough in patterns for me. So I think I'm going to do that, which I did for the Fil Collana Noirstrand, which is a colourwork sweater I worked last year that had waist decreases that you were meant to increase back out again. But then when I tried it on, I realised that the fact that I'd just decreased going down the waist was actually quite flattering. So that's my current plan, just to kind of keep a balance. What I really liked about this pattern, it's not one of the most popular patterns, so there isn't that many photos. And I bought these patterns ages ago, probably even before I planned to knit this, or like had bought this yarn, and there isn't that many photos of it. But when you do look at people's finished projects, the sleeves look quite big balloon. They look quite similar to the fan sweater, which I absolutely love. So yeah, I really like the fit of that, like a good balloon sleeve. And I just thought that with this colour I wanted something proper neutral, not this colour, like I wanted this yarn combo and the sweater to be as like basic as it could get, because I have a lot of like non-knitted item that are roll neck and basically black, and I wear it so much just because you can always wear it with like, you know, a printed skirt or any kind of trousers and all of these things. So yeah, decided to keep it really boring with this one. So that's currently my only like in progress knit after I finished the penny gloves yesterday. And so that's more or less the end of the episode today. I might talk a little bit about knitting plans, because obviously, as I said, I am hoping I will get to test knit one of Lisa's summer patterns, and so I'm aware that there might be test knit on my needles again. And the funny thing is that I thought after this that I would just be done. I feel like I go through that every single time I test knit quite a big project. Had it after the office tea as well. When I test knitted the dress back in December, like some of the ones where my turnaround has to be quicker, that towards the very tail end I'm like, all right, I just need like a period where I have no deadlines and I just knit for fun. And then as soon as I cast this off, I felt a little bit lost. Maybe I'm just starting to realise as a fairly monogamous knitter, I quite thrive with having that pressure finishing something. So it's just to say I might hopefully be test knitting for Louise again, and so that might be what you see next time. But summer patterns are a lot smaller than an all over oversized cable sweater, so hopefully it will not be as time consuming. So I'm planning to continue to knit through some smaller projects, because that is actually feeling really motivating to me. I could tell that even though the penny gloves were quite a boring knit in some ways, or quite a simple knit, I was just drawn more to it than the sweater. So I might in the next couple of days look in my planned projects for what's in my stash and knit one of them. I think the biggest problem is that I'm kind of struggling to, like, I don't mind buying some patterns, but I don't want to buy loads of patterns because it adds up quite quickly for some of those small projects. So I'm also trying to strike a balance between finding some free patterns while also supporting designers, and I think that can be a bit of a hard balance. So anyway, I definitely think there's going to be more oddball type knitting or like leftover stash knitting on my needles soon, and then I'm going to power through that sweater because I started, like, obviously the roll neck I had finished, but the rest of the yoke I have essentially knitted in less than a week without even being that working that hardcore on it. So I'm kind of hoping if I just buckle down I could get off my needles. As part of this bore along, I think I'm still feeling really motivated to knit through my stash, like feeling really motivated to like pick projects and just get them off the needles. Also because I'm starting to think about what I then would want to buy next or knit next, and to do that I just think I need to get through some of my stash. So anyway, this was a long ramble to say all of this. So that's sort of what's in my plans. Basically nothing properly concrete, maybe another test knit, maybe a few stash projects. On the personal front, I feel like I said last time that I've been doing really well, and I still am. It's actually really nice to have had a long period where I felt really good. I felt like I've stayed on top of things a lot better, felt a lot more myself. It's funny, every time I mention it I always get someone commenting and saying it's such a relief that you say it. But again, Fela has gone from being an absolute menace as a puppy. She was, when I speak to other people with puppies, Fela still seems to rank quite highly, maybe just below resource guarding puppy, which she wasn't too bad for. Besides with stones, we definitely learnt our lesson with that quite quickly. But with most things she isn't resource guarding like at all, but she was the nippiest, a horrible sleeper. She was really bad for like biting things she weren't meant to. She basically thought she was half kangaroo, so she'd jump all over the place, and oh god. And she's finally she's almost 11 months and she's just a dream now. Absolutely perfect. I cannot believe it. We are finally making proper headway with issues we've had when out walking. So she used to have essentially a form of leash reactivity that comes from being frustrated that you can't go up to other dogs. So it's like a friendly reactive, meaning that if dogs came to her face she wouldn't like bite them, but it can come across as quite intense, and it can be quite hard to manage because once your dog kind of develops that feeling towards other dogs, what you really want to avoid is other dogs speaking to your dog, because it teaches your dog that reacting gets them to other dogs, which you obviously don't want your dog like barking and pulling and whining and being a menace on the lead. So we're finally making headway with that, and some of that I definitely credit to the fact that she's had her first season and like she's maturing in that sense. And she's one of the, like, she loves sleeping in the morning. Fela's not a morning dog. It's quite funny, when I go to the gym at 5:30 she will get up and go outside in the garden. She will always go out in the garden when someone gets up, and then as soon as you open the door she just runs straight back upstairs to go back to bed. So yeah, Fela is bringing me so much joy. We are obviously in those final phases of wedding planning, and I'm trying to get excited for it. Still hasn't really kicked in. This weekend I pick up my wedding dress, which is crazy, and it's been quite stressful because I, as many brides I'm sure, when I bought the wedding dress originally there was a year to go, which is like the normal time for you to buy a wedding dress, in case there's like lead time getting it delivered, etc. Now my wedding dress is a sample, meaning that when I bought it I bought the size I tried on, and if I'd ordered it in a shop I would probably have ordered it a size up to have more leeway, but at the time I wasn't, you know, it was a year away. I was like, I can definitely, knowing that I have to fit into this dress, like it'll be fine. And at the time it did fit, but obviously with the pandemic I'm sure I'm not the only one who definitely definitely have gained some weight, and in a lot of ways I feel like it's funny, I reflected on it when I first started knitting. I was proper, like, I'm sure like many women, and this is going to be really triggering, as you can tell, we're moving into like body issues and weight and all of this, and I know that can be massively triggering, so please feel free to leave. But I'm sure like many women, I have always, like growing up, I've always thought if I just weighed this much less, I'm sure I'd be much more lovable, I'd look much nicer, I'd be much happier. It's like that's what I'm missing. And I spent many years feeling that way about myself, about my body, always like wishing I was skinnier, wishing I was slimmer. And for some reason during the pandemic, something has just, it just kind of switched for me. And it's not been instantaneous, because while I have been knitting, when I very first started knitting, it kind of, suddenly your size means something else. When you pick a pattern, you have to know your measurements, and you have to know what kind of fit you want. And I know that a lot of designers are like, well, if I don't use extra small, but letters or numbers, that it then there isn't like a value attached to a size. But at the end of the day, if there's an order to how the if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you are still a bigger number if you're a size 6 and a size 4, right? So I think for me, that is not a fix for me. I think it's for lots of people, and it solves that kind of issue for them, but it did not for me. And I kind of came, couldn't find knitters that looked like me, found that really hard, not being able to see what patterns would look on my size. And that's really why I started showing knits on my body, because I was like, I'm not ashamed, right? I might have issues with how I feel sometimes, how I look, all of these things, but at the end of the day, I'm not ashamed of myself. And that's why I started showing knits. And there's been many a times that I've posted pictures where I look happy and smiling, and in complete honesty, when I looked at the pictures, I just saw where my belly looked too big, or where my double chin was, or the lack of cheekbone definition, all of these silly things that you look for in yourself, and spent a long time really being bothered about that. And then as time has progressed, I think what changed for me, I was like, I'm not going to be any less loved depending on how I look, not by me, and not by my partner, and not by anyone I care about. And also, my body can do so much good. It can lift certain weights, and it can walk long walks, and it can clean a whole house, which, let me tell you, that's workout on its own. It can, my hands can knit these amazing things. And all of a sudden, I was like, I'm not going to be happier if I'm slimmer. I'm going to be happier if I'm fitter, maybe, or stronger, but it's not going to be the weight that defines me. And for me, it really changed how I felt about the world, and it really changed how I felt about food. All of a sudden, food stopped having like a good and a bad value to it. And the whole point is that having to fit back into this wedding dress, I've definitely had to reintroduce a certain level of value attached to food, and a certain like, right, I need to fit into this dress, so I have to look a certain way. And that has been a really hard balance, and it's a balance that I'm still striking, I think, between wanting to fit into this dress that is still my dream dress. I picked the same dress tomorrow. My feelings about the dress, even though it's been 3 years since I bought it, have not changed. But again, trying to do it in a way where I don't completely lose my mind has been a bit tough. It has brought some positives to it. I'm actually really enjoying eating really like fresh and nutritious food. I'm not going to say healthy, because you know what, I think health is a bit hard to define. Oh, that's loud. But even just eating nutritious food, like, can we talk about how amazing like cold strawberries from the fridge is? Like proper fresh sweet strawberries, my favorite. And it's really made me like rediscover foods like that. But that is taking up a lot of my mind and time. And it's also something I think I need to find a way to express, because what's really frustrating in this process is that as a bride, I hate this pressure from the outside that, well, you're always going to, you know, people being like, well, you're going to want to look the best for your wedding, you know, it's like the biggest day ever. And again, it kind of puts this like, if you don't look a certain way, then are you really worthy of love? Are you worthy of being married and all of this? And that's not true. The true reason I have to fit back into this dress is that it's a lot of money to buy a new dress that we just don't have in the budget. We spent all our money on Vela, so I can't really justify having to buy a completely new dress, and I can't change it now. So I'm trying to focus on the good sides of it. I also think that's taken me a bit away from knitting, because, you know, being up at 5:30, I am pretty goose by the end of the day. I can be really tired. But being back to CrossFit is doing me so much good. I absolutely thrive when I've been to CrossFit. I love it. And the nice thing is that by finding something I love, I don't force myself to do things I don't. So I've given up this idea that for the wedding I should probably be able to run a 5k in like 20 minutes. Instead, I'm like, well, I do take Vela for a few walks. Maybe I just enjoy the walks I take with her, whatever distance they are, and just accept that doing CrossFit 3 times a week is enough. But I think a lot of this final wedding prep has been really soured by that. And that's the thing about, in some ways, you know, knitting as a hobby, a part of that hobby is me and my body, and that can be a bit strange at times as well. And it's, yeah, something I think is quite important to talk about. Because I might lose weight for the wedding and I might look slimmer, and I don't want anyone to, I kind of don't want it to be like, wow, Karoline lost all of this weight, she must be so disciplined and happy because of it, because that's what I think sometimes when I see other people, because you're just, it's so ingrained in you, isn't it? And I'm completely comfortable with the fact that whatever I look like for the wedding will probably not be permanent, because I will want to make certain changes to my life after it, even if I keep some of the changes I've made to be that way. Anyway, that was an incredibly long personal rant about something, but I still think it's important to talk about as we move closer to it, because it is taking up a lot of my mental headspace, and making me a little bit, at the moment I think it's like, in the past week or two, I feel like I've been on the good side of it. I felt like it's doable and that it's actually good, but I've certainly also had moments where it's not felt that good, and so I'm trying to get back to a place where I just focus on the good it does me instead of the bad, I guess. But yeah, I also think it's important to talk about, because Instagram is, you know, glossy, perfect photos of someone looking happy and confident, and it's always broken my heart when I get messages and people like, wow, Karoline, I cannot believe that you're just so confident and that you like just show it like all the knits on yourself, and you just seem so happy and confident and certain of yourself. And it's not a ruse, obviously, but it's not the full truth, is it? So there's so many facets, and social media has its positives, but with these type of things I certainly think it can have its negative as well. And I feel like the fact that we're back to drilling is a sign I should shut up, isn't it? So thank you so much for watching. I always appreciate all of you that come back and that comments and that likes and the messages and all of this. So hopefully I'll see you soon. Bye.